When you hear the name Afghanistan today, you likely picture isolated, war-torn mountains. But to understand the true story of this land, we have to look past the modern dust and see what this territory looked like for most of human history, an incredibly wealthy, vibrant epicenter of global trade. The defining feature of Afghanistan is its geography. Look at a map of Asia. It sits dead center at the intersection of the Middle East, Central Asia, and the Indian subcontinent. It is the ultimate natural land bridge. Because of that position, anyone who wanted to control the flow of the world's wealth across the Silk Road had to control this terrain. Alexander the Great marched his armies here, and nomadic groups like the Kushans established sprawling empires to tax and protect these trade routes. With trade came ideas. The Indian Mauryan Empire pushed into the southern and eastern regions, bringing Buddhism with them. The religion flourished here for centuries, leaving behind architectural wonders on a monumental scale, like the famous Buddhas carved directly into the cliffs of Bamiyan. Over the medieval period, Arab armies introduced Islam, and indigenous Afghan dynasties rose to power. But that wealth also drew devastation. In the 13th century, Genghis Khan's invasions swept through, obliterating major trade cities and massacring the population. Yet, through centuries of shifting empires and immense destruction, the strategic calculus remained the same. Afghanistan was a prize. It was a vital territory to be conquered, held, and exploited. By the 18th century, the region was exhausted. It had spent 200 years being fought over by the Indian Mughals to the east and the Persian Safavids to the west. But as both of those giant empires began to decline, a power vacuum opened up. In 1747, a Pashtun tribal leader named Ahmad Shah Durrani saw an opportunity. He unified the local Afghan tribes and forged an independent state that stretched from eastern Persia down into northern India. For the first time, a modern, unified Afghan empire existed. But the very geography that had made the region rich for millennia was about to draw the attention of two rapidly expanding industrial empires. As the 19th century dawned, the world's trade routes moved to the oceans. Afghanistan was no longer the center of global commerce. Instead, it became a massive mountainous roadblock caught between two new superpowers. To the south, the British Empire was consolidating its hold over the Indian subcontinent, a profitable territory they wanted to protect from northern threats. Meanwhile, the Russian Empire was steadily marching its borders southward across Central Asia, looking to expand its sphere of influence closer to warm-water ports. This map shows the dynamic of the Great Game. You have the British in the south and Russians in the north. Neither empire wanted the headache of governing the harsh Afghan terrain. They just wanted to block the other side from having it. The British tried to install a puppet ruler to secure their border, leading to the First Anglo-Afghan War in 1839. It ended in complete disaster. The Afghan tribes fought back with fierce resistance, and an entire British army was virtually wiped out while trying to retreat from Kabul. Facing heavy casualties and the immense cost of waging war in the mountains, the foreign empires realized that military conquest wasn't going to work. Instead, they shifted their strategy toward diplomatic containment. During a second invasion late in the century, the British forced the Afghan leadership to sign the Treaty of Ghaznavids. This agreement officially handed control of Afghanistan's foreign affairs over to the British. In 1993, the British formalized containment here. They drew the Durand Line to separate Afghan territory from British India. Drawn for imperial convenience, not geography, it sliced straight through the Pashtun ancestral lands, absorbing half the population into British India, modern-day Pakistan. By splitting families and tribes across a heavily guarded border, the empires created a permanent geopolitical fracture. That single line drawn on a map would eventually become the perfect staging ground for decades of modern warfare. Afghanistan eventually reclaimed its full independence in 1919. By the mid-20th century, under the 40-year reign of King Zahir Shah, the country experienced a rare period of relative peace. The government began building infrastructure, passing a democratic constitution, and modernizing urban centers like Kabul. That fragile stability shattered in 1978 when Afghan communists seized power in a bloody coup. As rural uprisings threatened to topple the new radical government, The Soviet Union sent its military across the border in 1979 to prop them up. The Soviet invasion instantly resurrected the old imperial rivalries, but this time under the shadow of the Cold War. The United States, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia heavily funded and armed Afghan resistance fighters, the Mujahideen, with a clear goal: bleed the Soviet military dry. To do this, the resistance exploited the very geography the British had mapped out a century prior. The Mujahideen used the Pakistani side of the divided Pashtun territory as a safe haven to organize, train, and launch attacks back across the Durand Line. By the time the battered Soviet army finally withdrew in defeat in 1989, 1 million Afghans were dead, and millions more were refugees. The 19th century buffer state had been successfully converted into a modern proxy graveyard. The power vacuum left by the Soviets plunged the country right into a brutal civil war. Out of that chaos emerged the Taliban, who captured Kabul in 1996. They imposed severe restrictions on human rights, entirely banned women from public life, and provided a safe haven for al-Qaeda. Following the September 11th attacks, a US-led coalition invaded the country and rapidly dismantled the Taliban regime. This initiated a 20-year era under an internationally recognized Islamic republic. Billions of dollars poured in to build schools, infrastructure, and urban economies. But beneath the surface, the government, led by figures like Hamid Karzai, struggled with deep systemic corruption and an insurgency that refused to die. Then, in August 2021, as the US military executed a final withdrawal, the Afghan military and government simply collapsed. The Taliban marched back into Kabul, immediately rolling back 2 decades of educational and social progress for women, and plunging the nation into an economic freeze. What is happening in Afghanistan today is not a sudden accident, nor is it the inevitable fate of its people. It is the cumulative, tragic result of a land whose geography made it so valuable it was systematically partitioned, isolated, and trapped by empires playing games on a map.